Right. Round two, made a mistake the first time. What we're going to run through is the structural elements of the build and inside the Rapid Pro. So what we've got here is a set of plans. Now, on these plans, what we've got is a double-story house. Now, what we're going to say is everything that's in blue is the existing build. We don't know the configuration of it, but we do want to, provide living, the meals room, and basically extend everything out and then put an upper floor on. So for the purposes of the estimation, what we're going to do is we're going to say it's not a flat site, double story, answer these questions as it is. I'm going to go into a little bit more extended detail in a minute, because we're going to answer the most important question, which is the building area. Now, it's very important to understand, and I said this in last week's meeting, whenever you see a gold triangle, please read the information. It is critical. Building area in my version, without reading the notes and explaining to you guys over video, is basically wherever we have new work. So what that means is earthworks, slab, walls, ceiling, roof, everything from start to finish, floor coverings, the full book. So for this particular project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure all the new work that is on the plan. On the ground floor, I'm not going to include the porch because that's going to be a separate square meter rate. And it's actually not part of the internal work. So with the porch, what we don't see is external walls. What we don't see is the internal wall painting. So the square meter rate is going to be different. So we're not including it in our building area. When I go to my upper floor, I am going to measure through the void. Right. Now, this explains the building area in as simple as possible. Building area is work that is brand new work from top to bottom. So inside the existing house, the slab's going to stay, potentially some of the walls are going to stay, and some of the treatments that are inside the house is going to stay. So there is no reason why we are going to use that as building area. However, when we go to the laundry, everything else that's in that different color, that is all brand new works. I also have not included the outdoor area as my building area because that's done on a separate square meter rate and a separate parts of the program. Very important to know. Once again, there's actually no roof over the outdoor area. It's just a pergola. There's no ceiling, there's no insulation, there's no, downlights. So it's not included as my building area. Right. So for this particular job, I'm going to say my building area. Well, I need to pick something up. Just need to change my collaboration. For this particular job, my building area is going to be 240 square meters. There are 3 bedrooms upstairs. Now, inside the existing property, inside the existing area, there is 1, 2 bedrooms. I want to include those bedrooms because when I go do my estimate later down the track, it's important information to know. So 3 + 2 equals 5. 5 bedrooms, and there are 2 bathrooms. What's going to happen at this stage, I'm going to hit show pricing. And what we're going to see is a construction price at the top. What's very important to know is what's included in that construction price. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to basically have a very familiar understanding of our base inclusions. As I click out on the PDF, what we see is what's included. So we have flat conditions, minimum hard digging allowances, standard footing, standard slab. The list goes on. The best way to describe this inclusions is if we think about a house to lock up that has no fancy features in it, that's what my base inclusions are. So when I go down into my concrete slab, don't expect the base inclusions to have board piers. Because if you were to take your mindset to say, what is the perfect site? The perfect site allows us just to put in it allows us to put in perimeter footings and a slab at 85 mil or 100 mil, and then we continue on. But what we're trying to do here is that gets us to the starter's line. So with the structural elements of the build, we're starting with basically the basic of construction. This is where we go out into our price library and things get a little bit more technical. What we want to do is always read the main header, which says it's a flat site. But what we discussed when we just started this estimation was it wasn't a flat site. So what we got to do is we got to go down and make a decision. Is it minor excavation or is it bulk excavation? Very important. Gold triangle. Read the gold triangle. I'm not going to click out on the gold triangle because I'm going to give you my explanation of what minor excavation means. So minor excavation to me, what that means to me is that we have a little bit of fall on the site, because we got to remove some sand. We got to get the excavator in and potentially might have to do some manual hand digging and all that sort of stuff. That's required on the job. Now, if you do change the specification, you will notice that, does it? It shouldn't change, but the allowances is no good, doesn't really change between different levels of specification because earthworkers are either expensive or they're not. So what we're going to make a decision based on the plan. So if I go down into my elevations, if I look at my elevations here, we've got like a slight fall. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a decision, an educated decision of exactly how much is going to happen. Now, the decision I'm going to make here is I am not going to be so perfect with what's going on because, first of all, it's an estimation and we just need to have a cost in there. So as you can see here in my green, actually put someone on mute. As you can see with my green here, basically, just give me 1 sec. Sorry, I had to mute a couple of people. In the green here, we're making a decision that this is the area that we're going to do earthworks on. It's not perfect. We're just putting an allowance in there. So about 165 square meters is what we're going to allow for excavation. I'm putting in $40,000. Now, being an estimator, you still need to be sound about understanding costings. Is $35,000 a little bit too much to put in there to excavate all this rear area? Now, to be honest, if I'm actually looking at the site, we've only got a meter access on the left and meter access on the right. It's probably going to be all manually done. I would possibly allow that to happen. However, if the access was a lot easier, I might reduce my costing. If I was going to have bulk excavation, what that means in my terminology is basically we need to remove at least 3 meters in depth of sand. We need to put in some block work, some waterproofing, concrete filling, reinforcement, structural walls, all that sort of stuff. But this particular project doesn't have a fall greater than 3 meters. As we can see on the plan, we don't need to measure that. We should be smart enough to understand the fall is not 3 meters. So therefore, I'm not going to be using the bulk excavation. Access track, common sense. What that means to me is that if we're standing on the road and we need to cart material to the property, this particular property has a driveway, so we don't need an access track. But if we had a property where it was very sandy and it wasn't very easy to get into, we'd probably need an access track. Now, We also need to make good decisions on provisional sums. Now, the system is set up, like I said at the very start, the base build does not include all these extra features because we can't estimate a square meter rate based on a particular type of piece of land or a particular type of structure of a house. So we've got a perfect flat site, perfect flat house, or perfect house, we want to call it that way. And then from there, we need to add all these extras. If we need more earthworks equipment, if we need more hard digging because potentially there's lots of board piers or there's lots of footings, traffic management. Look, if you're working on a one-way street and there's a school or there is a shopping center close by, we might need these elements to be able to put the costing together. Inside the drainage component of base build, what we have is pretty much just stormwater pipe in the ground, and we're connecting the downpipes to the pipework that's in the ground. There might be a pit, there might be a soak well already attached inside the base estimation, but what the problem is that happens is we sometimes need, we need a rainwater tank. So I want to make a decision about the size of the rainwater tank based on the roof size. Now, I'm going to take a look at this property here, and this property is probably about 400 square meters of roof cover. We cannot put potentially just one 1,200 litre tank. We actually need to have some sound understanding of estimating to make a good decision here. If just this upper floor was the roof cover, yeah, we could probably get away with the 1,200 tank. But what we're going to do in this situation is we're probably going to put in two 1,200 litre tanks. But also we've got to be mindful about estimating. It's all well and good to be actual, but sometimes when we put the actual price in, we could be overestimating. So it's very important to have a good strategy of what you're going to do here. I probably wouldn't put two 1,200s in. I might just go to the 3,000 and we'll leave it at that. Strip drains, really important to know. Obviously, if we have sand that is falling towards the house, we need to put in a strip drain so the water doesn't back up against the house. Inside of our base model, that's not included because that's not what's included on a perfect site. On a perfect site, you don't need a strip drain. Further going out into the estimation, what we need to do is if we have demolition that's required on the project, which this project we do, it's a pretty gray area. There's no right or wrong item that's going on. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that the kitchen is going to get demolished. So my kitchen area needs to be a full area. My ensuite area needs to be a full area. Actually, sorry, we're going to leave the ensuite and we're going to leave the kitchen. That's going to remain in place. There's a little bit of works to do to create this staircase and a little bit of works to do in the hallway. And we're going to say the rest of the house is going to remain in place. So we're going to make it a decision that, yes, there's demolition and we're putting in 50 square meters. What needs to happen here is we need the electrician to potentially come in, disconnect services, plumber to come in to disconnect services, and any carpentry work. What this item is here inside this part is basically saying, like, is the job hard for demolition? If it's extremely difficult, extremely big, we're probably going to get hit up for some more extra days. So we just want to put an allowance in there to set the job up. This particular set of plans that I'm showing you seems to be quite simple. So we're not going to add this in. Very important to know, if it's an old house, we possibly might need asbestos removal. That is not included in a base perfect house. So these are all the items that we're adding to the system to make it custom. I like the process of ticking the box to say, yes, I've done that part of the estimate. I think it's important to know basically what you've done. You save. If you walk away, you know where you're at with the estimation. This is probably the last part of going through this first session, talking about the structural elements of the build. I'm going to run through it as best as I can and as fast as I can with as much information as I can, but this is really critical to get right. As we expand out on the concrete, what's included in a base build for a concrete under your building area is basically a traditional slab with traditional footings around the outside. What we don't see is, in this living area, we don't have allowances for board piers. We don't have allowances for pad piers, for screw piles, concrete topping, all these features, insulation, because they are specification items that's outside the perfect slab. Now, based on our historical data, we know that because we're putting a slab on ground here, we're going to have internal thickenings at basically the inside of the slab. First rule that we always have with internal thickenings is that every external corner of the slab or an internal corner slab, we need to branch off and have a footing. So as you can see here, I'm drawing in where my footings are going to be connected up to. The second rule that is very common in estimating when doing an internal thickening layout is the span can no longer be greater than 4 meters to 6 meters. So the distance between here to here, if that's greater than 4 meters or greater than 6 meters, you need to put another beam in. So I'm going to make sure I put in another beam that goes across to here. I also have a gut feeling that they potentially might want to do something up the top here. I'm not afraid to overestimate in my structural elements of the build. I want to make sure that I've captured my costings, but there is also another strategy in estimating where basically you can overestimate and you can scare the client away. So you've got to make good decisions. You've got to know who you're dealing with your client. And you've got to basically understand what you're putting inside your estimation. For this particular job, I'm going to put in 55 linear meters of internal footings. I know based on the historical data of the property and also the area that we're probably going to have board piers because the soil in this particular location is soft. So we are going to have board piers. Same process applies when we need to make good decisions. Now, every 3 meters is probably a good starting point of where we're going to have board piers. So just make good decisions. Every corner usually has board piers. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to board piers, but what's really critical to make sure that we capture costings is that we make a good decision. It is better than putting nothing in there because what's going to end up happening in construction is we're going to get further down the track and we're going to align our Rapid Pro estimation, which is our preliminary estimation, to an actual estimation. And if we don't follow the rules, we're going to have a massive difference between our Rapid Pro, which is our QBE, and our final building estimate. Then the question's going to get asked, why is there such a difference? Maybe because we didn't follow those strategies to put those piers in. I'm going to speed up a little bit and go to a few more important items. As I go to the windows basically inside the Rapid Pro estimation is not going to tell you the actual window budget. We are saying that based on 246 square meters of building area, there is approximately going to be a certain allowance inside my base estimated price for windows. But in the perfect world of our base estimated construction price, we don't have awning windows, tilt turns, double hungs, louvers, all these fancy items. So what we've got to do is we've got to add it into the program. As you can see on these plans, when I go to the elevation, we don't have normal windows. So these are double hung windows. So what I got to do is I got to count my double hung windows. If I go one more step further, this little triangle here is representing a casement window. So we've got to add a casement window. It's actually very important to understand what basically is drawn on your elevations and understand what windows are drawn and how they're drawn. This is where you got to add in all your extras. External glazed doors is a bit of a gray area. I sometimes like to cut corners in estimating and just estimate as per plan, sometimes ignoring what's included in my base. But sometimes I acknowledge that there's one slider in there, okay? So maybe we need to change something in here to say 1x slider, something we need to fix up. If I look on the plans, what I've got on the plans is I've got double doors external. Now there's no sliders in here. So what I could potentially do is credit that existing slider. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to credit, and I'm going to have a thought in the back of my mind that I've got a little bit of money in there for an existing slider. Based on the value of this project, as we've already exceeded $1 million, I'm actually going to ignore it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the plans and count all my external double doors. 1, 2, 3. There's also a single door there and a single there. So 3 double doors. Double aluminium doors, put in 3, and I'm also going to do 2 singles. Remember, the most important part about getting the structural part right is reading what's inside your base inclusions and then clicking out on every item. Now, in this blue area, if the client wants to replace windows, this is actually outside of our building area. So if they want to replace the 2 windows in the master bedroom, what we actually got to do is we got to go to renovate windows. This is basically putting a cost in there to remove the window and replace the window for a basic window. But what the problem is on this plan, that window and that window is actually a casement window. So I got to go back to my upgrades, and then I got to put in 2 casement windows. So the lesson that's really important to learn here is the white area is my building area, but this blue is not my building area. So there's no allowance in here to replace any windows. If the plan says that these 2 windows in the master bedroom need to be replaced, what you got to do is you got to go to the windows, remove and replace the windows. External walls. Now, let's go back to the base inclusions of a base estimated house. The only way I can get my square meter rate correct is if I do my square meter rate on a Pacific finish. The Pacific finish is either a rendered panel or standard weatherboard cladding. As we look on this project here, these plans show brickwork that goes on the outside. So what I need to do is measure my linear meters of brickwork, because that's an additional cost, because in my base costing, I don't have brickwork. So I got to go down to my face brickwork and I got to add in my linear meters. Now let's say the front elevation of this house needs to be repainted. Because it's outside my building area, I have to go to the item that says renovate general. Now, there should be an item in here that says re-render walls. If we need to repaint the cladding, repair the brickwork, these are all costings that are inside the structure of the Rapid Pro. As we build out to the roofing, let's go back to the existing takeoff. That's my building area. And if I look correctly, my building area also goes a little bit like this. But what's outside my building area is the existing roof. So let's just do a quick sort of identification on the plan that is part of the existing. Now, there is absolutely no way that we're going to put on a brand spanking new shiny roof up the top and down that bottom level and just leave this area in green. So that area in green is approximately 200 square meters. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to renovate roofing and we're going to repair the existing roof. We're going to put in our 200 square meters. We also have extended options to remove and replace. If you read through these items, we can remove and replace. If we have skylights, punch in the skylights. The reason why there is a drop down for skylights, because if we look inside of our base inclusions, it does not say skylights. This plan doesn't have skylights, so we're not putting skylights in. There's no balcony. We're not going to do the balcony. When we look at the elevations, just take into mind that the base build inclusions, tiled roof, COLORBOND gutters. Do we have stone cladding? No, we don't. Do we have screening? No, we don't. Do we have windows? No, we don't. They're some of the basic functions of the site and the building structure. However, what we haven't done, and I'm just going to finish this up in a quick couple of minutes just to make sure we're on the same page, estimating this outdoor balcony sort of deck. Now, what I need to do is measure that area. I'm just going to say it is 65 square meters. The way I'm going to calculate this is I'm going to go to my external works. I'm going to go to my external floor treatments, and I'm going to do frame and decking. If I'm unsure of what's included, I click on my black triangle and it tells me everything that's included. And I'm going to put my 60 square meters in, and that captures my frame and deck. We will notice above the frame and deck, if I go to my roof plan, there's actually a timber pergola in there. So I actually need to go back into my building structure, go to my roofing, and then I'm going to add in a timber pergola. That's the basics of putting together the structural elements of the build. What's the most critical part about the structural element is the setup, making sure that we cover our building area of the new work only. From there, we can make good assessments, make good decisions. You will need to have some skill around understanding site conditions to be able to successfully do the structural elements of the build. If I was to put a process together to say, hey, is doing the structural elements of the build easier than the finishing? The finishing is actually easier. For example, you know, the kitchens, the bedrooms, all that sort of stuff. We're going to cover that next week. Hopefully I've answered a few questions here, but take the time to learn the base inclusions. That's actually really critical. Pulling up the spreadsheet and having an understanding of this is what's included in our base price. Does anybody have any questions before I close this off to maybe answer a few things? I just need to make sure I've got people unmuted because I have to mute some people. Anyone? No? All right. Thanks for that. I'm just going to stop recording and we can have any questions after that.